3,000 soldiers marched forward, knowing they were heading into enemy territory. But they did not expect this. Across the horizon, an army began to appear, not hundreds, not thousands. A force so large, it stretched beyond what they could clearly see. And in that moment, everything changed, because this was no longer a mission. It was survival. Then the battle began, and one by one, their commanders started to fall. The first, then the second, then the third. 3 leaders gone in the middle of war, and suddenly, 3,000 soldiers stood on a battlefield with no clear command, facing a force far greater than their own. This is the story of the Battle of Mu'tah, a battle not remembered for victory, but for what happened when everything began to collapse. This confrontation did not begin with armies. It began with a message. A messenger had been sent north, carrying communication beyond the Arabian region, but that message never reached its destination. The messenger was intercepted and killed. In the world of that time, this was not a small act. Messengers were protected by custom. They represented dialogue, negotiation, connection between powers. To kill one was to reject all of that. It was a signal that conflict had moved beyond words. Inside the growing Muslim community, the response was not immediate chaos. It was structured, measured. A force would be sent, not massive in size, but organized and disciplined, not to start a random war, but to respond to a violation that could not be ignored. And so, preparations began. Not for conquest, but for confrontation. The army that was assembled was not large, around 3,000 men. But what it lacked in numbers, it made up for in structure. Because before the army even began its march, leadership had already been defined with precision. There would be no confusion in battle, no struggle for authority. A clear chain of command was established. First, Zayd ibn Harithah. If he fell, command would pass to Ja'far ibn Abi Talib. If he too fell, then Abdullah ibn Rawahah would take control. 3 leaders, one after another. A system designed to keep the army standing no matter what happened. With this structure in place, the army began its journey north. Step by step, they moved toward a region where the balance of power was very different, where they would not be the stronger force, where they would not have the advantage, but they continued, disciplined, organized, and ready for whatever awaited them. As they approached the frontier, reports began to reach them. The opposing force was not small. It was not equal. It was far larger than expected. Accounts from the time describe a massive army, aligned with the Byzantine Empire and its regional allies. The exact numbers are debated, but the reality was clear. This was a force that greatly outmatched them. For a moment, everything slowed. 3,000 men, standing at the edge of a decision. Do they advance into overwhelming odds, or do they turn back and abandon the mission? This was not a tactical choice alone. It was psychological. And in the end, they chose to continue. Not because the odds favored them, but because turning back would mean something far greater. And so, they moved forward, toward a battle they now knew would not be easy. The armies met. Formations closed the distance, and the battle began. At first, it was controlled, lines held, movements were disciplined. But soon, the intensity grew. And at the front of it all was the first commander, Zayd ibn Harithah. He did not stand behind the lines. He led from the front, directly engaged in the fighting, holding the position, maintaining the structure of the army, until he fell. The first break in leadership, the first moment where the system was tested, but the structure held, because immediately, the second commander stepped forward, Ja'far ibn Abi Talib. He took control without hesitation. The battle did not pause. It did not slow. It intensified. Now the pressure was greater. The enemy force was still overwhelming. The soldiers was still outnumbered. And yet, the fight continued. Ja'far remained at the front, holding the standard, maintaining command, until he too was killed in the fighting. Now the tension rose even higher. 2 commanders gone. But still, the structure held, because the third stepped forward, Abdullah ibn Rawahah. At this point, the situation was critical. The army had already lost 2 leaders. The pressure was constant. The battlefield offered no relief. And yet, he took command. He continued the fight, holding the line, trying to maintain control under extreme conditions, until he also fell. 3 commanders, one after another, gone, and now For the first time, there was no clear leader. This was the most dangerous moment of the entire battle, not because of the enemy alone, but because of what was happening inside the army. Without leadership, structure begins to collapse, orders become unclear, movement becomes uncertain, and in battle, uncertainty spreads faster than anything else. The risk was not just defeat, it was total breakdown. But in that moment, someone stepped forward, not originally assigned in the command chain, not expected to lead at that point, but ready to act. Khalid ibn al-Walid. He did not hesitate. He took control, and immediately, he began to stabilize the situation. He reorganized the lines. He restored structure. He slowed the chaos. This was not about attacking anymore. This was about control. Under his leadership, the army did not collapse. It adapted. It held together, even under pressure. At this point, the objective had changed. This was no longer a battle for victory. It was a battle for survival. And survival required something different. Not aggression, but discipline. Movement became controlled. Engagement became selective. The goal was no longer to push forward, but to preserve the army. Step by step, under organized leadership, the force began to withdraw. Not in panic, not in disorder, but with structure still intact, avoiding destruction, maintaining cohesion, and eventually, they left the battlefield. Not as conquerors, but not as a broken force either. They had faced overwhelming numbers, lost their commanders, and still, they survived. The Battle of Mu'tah was not a traditional victory, but it proved something just as powerful, that even when leadership falls, it can be rebuilt, that even under impossible pressure, an army can hold together, and that survival itself can be a form of success. Some battles are remembered for who won, others for how they refused to collapse. This was one of them. If you want to see what happens next in this series, that where survival turns into expansion and history shifts again, subscribe and stay with the story.